Hi, my name is Haley, and I'm doing my research paper and presentation on animal testing. Now, I have a sinus infection, so sorry. Alright, so what I started with my thesis statement was even though animal testing gives researchers a look into the side effects of certain medications, animal testing should be banned because it is morally wrong and experimentation with human medicine is invalid. One of the research topics that one reason why I chose this was because being a girl, there's a lot of makeup that people don't want you to buy because it was tested on animals. And I feel like there's probably many things in my house that were tested on animals that I had no idea about. So one of the most recent things that I found with my research was a actor that went undercover in a Canadian toxicology lab, and this was from March of 2017, so it was really recent. And he had a recorder on him the whole time. And one of the things he talked about was how the animals looked, like what was going on basically. And one quote that I found directly from the article was that the animals were thrown, slammed, suspended by their ears or limbs, struck with such force that the impact can be heard on the recorder, and open wounds and swollen infections were not being treated at all. Another thing that I found were that the technicians that worked in there were supposed to be documenting that the monkeys were having hair loss, and they didn't when they should have. And that kept on. There was another thing that the actor found that was how the animals were being kept, as in where they slept or where they used the bathroom. And another quote that I found was that there was inadequate housing without appropriate bedding or a flat area to rest, and the animals were being risked of being caught in the wire of the cages. They were also being exposed to loud noises, harmful levels of gases due to the buildup of urine and feces on top of their living spaces, which all of these things contribute to psychological stressors, which render the adequacy of the testing, which the technicians aren't supposed to record this because it isn't right. You can't test someone that isn't in the right environment. I also found a study that was done by Kim Evans. He did a poll from 2001 2008 that talked about what's morally wrong about animal testing and the percentage. And in 2001, it was 26% thought that it was morally wrong. And in 2008, it was 38% thought it was morally wrong. So it just goes to show you that more people are starting to be more aware of how bad animals are treated when it comes to this. The next paragraph that I did was on how the medication, typical human medication, can affect an animal. And one of these quotes that I really liked from Animal Testing is a Bad Science, it was, taking a healthy being from a completely different species, artificially inducing a condition that he or she would never normally contract, keeping him or her in an unnatural and distressful environment, and trying to apply the results to a naturally occurring disease in human beings is just wasting lives and resources. And I thought that was really interesting because it really gives you a perspective on, wow, this really probably doesn't work. And this is some of the drugs, human normal drugs that we probably use every other day or every day that I found interesting. So the drug penicillin, which is a bacteria drug, can actually kill a guinea pig, but it doesn't work on a rabbit. Aspirin, which is a very everyday type medication, it can kill a cat, but it can cause disabilities in rats, mice, guinea pigs, dogs, and monkeys. The painkiller morphine, which is a typical painkiller used in hospitals, is supposed to suppress pain in a human, but for goats, cats, and horses, it only stimulates the pain. So just common household, everyday things that people use can kill animals. Like, they don't work when they should work. So it just goes to show you that just because it is an animal doesn't mean it's going to react the same as a human. Another big big thing that I found was that 92% of all drugs that are shown to be safe and effective in animal tests fail in human trials because they do not work or they are dangerous. Well, that was really interesting because that's 92%. That's a big percent. And that last 8% that did pass these tests have to be relabeled because the side effects were not identified in the animal test, which I think is pretty scary if you really think about it. Another thing that I found was my next paragraph was about what is this benefiting anything across the United States, and the big thing was cost and where our cancer research and all that is ending up today. And 40% of all the research funding is from the U.S. National Institutes of Health, and 40% of it's going to this animal testing. And just is going to fund this animal testing while more alcohol and drugs treatment centers, parental care programs, community mental health clinics, and trauma units are being closed down because there's not enough funds to keep them going. It makes you realize that why are we spending money on stuff that doesn't work when we could be spending it on things that people need every single day. Back to how the United States ranks in this. The United States still ranked 49th in the world in life expectancy and second worst in infant mortality in the developed world. So with that being said, it makes you pose the question of is animal testing really worth it, because it doesn't seem to be benefiting anything. Another topic that I chose was about people bring up the argument of is animal testing used in research facilities and schools, and it's actually not, which is surprising. One of the things that I found was students at these schools don't even need to actually dissect an animal or live animal or anything like that to become a surgeon. It's not required or recommended or anything like that. You can get through all of your schooling without having to do that. And one of the really interesting things I found, that with no use of an animal, there's students that use human brain cells to develop a microbrain, which can be used to study artificial skin and bone marrow and the irritancy of protein membranes. And these students did that without using animals at all, and people will always say that monkeys and pigs are the closest to our immune systems, but in reality, you don't even need that to make these type of things. It's just using cadavers, like being an organ donor and donate your body to science. They have made these things where it's a simulator and it simulates a human, and people use that instead of using animals. And I thought that was really interesting. And another thing, a research topic that I found was that 95% of medical schools do not require or expect students to have any animal dissection or experimentation on live animals. And that 95% includes Yale and Harvard and the really big Ivy schools. And that is my research paper.